What's up, folks? I'm Dan, and welcome to I've Been Meaning to Read That, the show where I read books out loud that I've been meaning to read. Let's go. Guys, today was nuts. There was a fight in the gym, then there was another fight where a student punched a teacher, and then I had kids cussing each other out and trying to fight each other. It was crazy. It was just crazy. So I'm glad to be here on this rainy fall afternoon in my basement with my cat, reading the Count of Monte Cristo. You know, it's amazing the power that a book has to just transport us to somewhere else entirely so that we can get away from all the nonsense. Now, on a slightly lighter note, I did have kids yesterday being super goofy and trying to get that shock value humor and say things like, Hey, Mr. Welch, you know they got a free Diddy, right? My man Diddy didn't do nothing wrong. He had all that baby oil in his house. He was just ashy, man. He was just ashy. And I'll admit, as soon as they weren't looking, I did laugh a little bit, because that's nonsense. All right, without further ado, let's be transported to France in the 1700s and hear about the Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 100, The Apparition. As the procurer had told Madame Danglars, Valentine was not yet recovered. Bowed down with fatigue, she was indeed confined to her bed, and it was in her own room and from the lips of Madame de Villefort that she heard all the strange events we have related. We mean the flight of Eugenie and the arrest of Andrea Cavalcanti, or rather Benedetto, together with the accusation of murder pronounced against him. But Valentine was so weak that this recital scarcely produced the same effect it would have done had she been in her usual state of health. Indeed, her brain was only the seat of vague ideas and confused forms, mingled with strange fancies. Those alone presented themselves before her eyes. During the daytime, Valentine's perceptions remained tolerably clear, owing to the constant presence of Monsieur Noirtier, who caused himself to be carried to his granddaughter's room, where he watched her with his paternal tenderness. Villefort also, on his return from the law courts, frequently passed an hour or two with his father and child. At 6 o'clock, Villefort retired to his study. At 8, Monsieur d'Avrigny himself arrived, bringing the night draught prepared for the young girl, and then Monsieur Noirtier was carried away. A nurse of the doctor's choice succeeded them, and never left till about 10 or 11 o'clock, when Valentine was asleep. As she went downstairs, she gave the keys of Valentine's room to Monsieur de Villefort, so that no one could reach the sick room, excepting that of Madame de Villefort and little Edward. Every morning, Morel called on Noirtier to receive news of Valentine, and, extraordinary as it seemed, each day found him less uneasy. Certainly, though Valentine still labored under dreadful nervous excitement, she was better, and moreover, Monte Cristo had told him when, half distracted, he had rushed to the Count's house, that if she were not dead in 2 hours, she would be saved. Now 4 days had elapsed, and Valentine still lived. The nervous excitement of which we speak pursued Valentine even in her sleep, or rather, in that state of somnolence which succeeded her waking hours. It was then, in the silence of night, in the dim light shed from the alabaster lamp on the chimney-piece, that she saw the shadows pass and repass, which hover over the bed of sickness, and fan the fever with their trembling wings. First, she fancied she saw her stepmother threatening her. Then Morel stretched his arms towards her. Sometimes mere strangers, like the Count of Monte Cristo, came to visit her. Even the very furniture in these moments of delirium seemed to move, and this state lasted till about 3 o'clock in the morning, when a deep, heavy slumber overcame Valentine, from which she did not awake till daylight. On the evening of the day on which Valentine had learned of the flight of Eugenie and the arrest of Benedetto, Villefort having retired as well as Noirtier and d'Avrigny, her thoughts wandered in a confused maze, alternately reviewing her own situation and the events she had just heard. 11 o'clock had struck. The nurse, having placed the beverage prepared by the doctor within reach of the patient and locked the door, was listening with terror to the comments of the servants in the kitchen, and storing her memory with all the horrible stories which had for some months past amused the occupants of the antechambers in the house of the king's attorney. Meanwhile, an unexpected scene was passing in the room which had been so carefully locked. 10 minutes had elapsed since the nurse had left. Valentine, who for the last hour had been suffering from the fever which returned nightly, incapable of controlling her ideas, was forced to yield to the excitement which exhausted itself in producing and reproducing a succession and recurrence of the same fancies and images. The night lamp threw out countless rays, each resolving itself into some strange form to her disordered imagination, when suddenly, by its flickering light, Valentine thought she saw the door of her library, which was in the recess by the chimney-piece, open slowly, though she in vain listened for the sound of the hinges on which it turned. At any other time, Valentine would have seized the silken bell-pull and summoned assistance, but nothing astonished her in her present situation. Her reason told her that all the visions she beheld were but the children of her imagination, and the conviction was strengthened by the fact that in the morning no traces remained of the nocturnal phantoms who disappeared with the coming of daylight. From behind the door a human figure appeared, but the girl was too familiar with such apparitions to be alarmed, and therefore only stared, hoping to recognize Morel. The figure advanced towards the bed and appeared to listen with profound attention. At this moment, a ray of light glanced across the face of the midnight visitor. "It is not he," she murmured, and waited, in the assurance that this was but a dream, for the man to disappear or assume some other form. Still, she felt her pulse, and finding it throb violently, she remembered that the best method of dispelling such illusions was to drink, for a draught of the beverage prepared by the doctor to allay her fever seemed to cause a reaction of the brain, and for a short time she suffered less. Valentine therefore reached her hand towards the glass, but as soon as her trembling arm left the bed, the apparition advanced more quickly towards her, and approached the young girl so closely that she fancied she heard his breath and felt the pressure of his hand. This time the illusion, or rather the reality, surpassed anything Valentine had before experienced. She began to believe herself really alive and awake, and the belief that her reason was this time not deceived made her shudder. The pressure she felt was evidently intended to arrest her arm, and she slowly withdrew it. Then the figure, from whom she could not detach her eyes, and who appeared more protecting than menacing, took the glass and, walking towards the nightlight, held it up as if to test its transparency. This did not seem sufficient. The man, or rather the ghost, for he trod so softly that no sound was heard, then poured out about a spoonful into the glass and drank it. Valentine witnessed this scene with a sentiment of stupefaction. Every minute she had expected that it would vanish and give place to another vision, but the man, instead of dissolving like a shadow, again approached her and said in an agitated voice, "Now you may drink." Valentine shuddered. It was the first time one of these visions had ever addressed her in a living voice, and she was about to utter an exclamation. The man placed his finger on her lips. "The Count of Monte Cristo," she murmured. It was easy to see that no doubt now remained in the young girl's mind as to the reality of the scene. Her eyes started with terror, her hands trembled, and she rapidly drew the bedclothes closer to her. Still, the presence of Monte Cristo at such an hour, his mysterious, fanciful, and extraordinary entrance into her room through the wall, might well seem impossibilities to her shattered reason. "Do not call anyone. Do not be alarmed," said the Count. "Do not let a shade of suspicion or uneasiness remain in your breast. The man standing before you, Valentine, for this time it is no ghost, is nothing more than the tenderest father and the most respectful friend you could dream of." Valentine could not reply. The voice, which indicated the real presence of a being in the room, alarmed her so much that she feared to utter a syllable. Still, the expression of her eyes seemed to inquire, "If your intentions are pure, why are you here?" The Count's marvelous sagacity understood all that was passing in the young girl's mind. "Listen to me," he said, "or rather, look upon me. Look at my face, paler even than usual, and my eyes red with weariness. For 4 days I have not closed them, for I have been constantly watching you to protect and preserve you for Maximilian." The blood mounted rapidly to the cheeks of Valentine, for the name just announced by the Count dispelled all the fear with which his presence had inspired her. "Maximilian!" she exclaimed, and so sweet did the sound appear to her that she repeated it. "Maximilian! Has he then owned all to you?" "Everything. He told me your life was his, and I have promised him that you shall live." "You have promised him that I shall live?" "Yes." But, sir, you spoke of vigilance and protection. Are you a doctor? Yes, the best you could have at the present time, believe me. But you say you have watched? Said Valentine uneasily. Where have you been? I have not seen you. The Count extended his hand towards the library. I was hidden behind that door, he said, which leads into the next house, which I have rented. Valentine turned her eyes away and, with an indignant expression of pride and modest fear, exclaimed, Sir, I think you have been guilty of an unparalleled intrusion, and that what you call protection is more like an insult. Valentine, he answered, during my long watch over you, all I have observed has been what people visited you, what nourishment was prepared, and what beverage was served. Then, when the latter appeared dangerous to me, I entered, as I have now done, and substituted, in the place of the poison, a healthful draught, which, instead of producing the death intended, caused life to circulate in your veins. Poison? Death? Exclaimed Valentine, half believing herself under the influence of some feverish hallucination. What are you saying, sir? Hush, my child, said Monte Cristo, again placing his finger upon her lips. I did say poison and death, but drink some of this. And the Count took a bottle from his pocket containing a red liquid, of which he poured a few drops into the glass. Drink this, and then take nothing more tonight. Valentine stretched out her hand, but scarcely had she touched the glass when she drew back in fear. Monte Cristo took the glass, drank half its contents, and then presented it to Valentine, who smiled and swallowed the rest. Oh, yes, she exclaimed. I recognize the flavor of my nocturnal beverage which refreshed me so much and seemed to ease my aching brain. Thank you, sir, thank you. This is how you have lived during the last 4 nights, Valentine, said the Count. But oh, how I passed that time! The wretched hours I have endured, the torture to which I have submitted when I saw the deadly poison poured into your glass, and how I trembled lest you should drink it before I could find time to throw it away. Sir, said Valentine, at the height of her terror, you say you endured tortures when you saw the deadly poison poured into my glass, but if you saw this, you must also have seen the person who poured it. Yes. Valentine raised herself in bed and drew over her chest, which appeared whiter than snow, the embroidered cambric, still moist with the cold dews of delirium, to which were now added those of terror. You saw the person? Repeated the young girl. Yes, repeated the Count. What you tell me is horrible, sir. You wish to make me believe something too dreadful. What? Attempt to murder me in my father's house, in my room, on the bed of sickness? Oh, leave me, sir. You are tempting me. You make me doubt the goodness of Providence. It is impossible. It cannot be. Are you the first that this hand has stricken? Have you not seen Monsieur and Madame de Saint-Méran, Berrois, too, all fall? Would not Monsieur Noirtier also have fallen a victim, had not the treatment he has been pursuing for the last 3 years neutralized the effects of the poison? Oh, heaven, said Valentine. Is this the reason why Grandpapa has made me share all his beverages during the last month? And have they all tasted of a slightly bitter flavor, like that of a dried orange peel? Oh, yes, yes. Then that explains all, said Monte Cristo. Your grandfather knows, then, that a poisoner lives here. Perhaps he even suspects the person. He has been fortifying you, his beloved child, against the fatal effects of the poison, which has failed because your system was already impregnated with it. But even this would have availed little against a more deadly medium of death employed 4 days ago, which is generally but too fatal. But who, then, is this assassin, this murderer? Let me also ask you a question. Have you never seen anyone enter your room at night? Oh, yes. I have frequently seen shadows pass close to me, approach, disappear, but I took them for visions, raised by my feverish imagination, and indeed, when you entered, I thought I was under the influence of delirium. Then you do not know who it is that attempts your life? No, said Valentine. Who could desire my death? You shall know it now, then, said Monte Cristo, listening. How do you mean? Said Valentine, looking anxiously around. Because you are not feverish or delirious tonight, but thoroughly awake. Midnight is striking, which is the hour murderers choose. Oh, heavens, exclaimed Valentine, wiping off the drops which ran down her forehead. Midnight struck slowly and sadly. Every hour seemed to strike with leaden weight upon the heart of the poor girl. "Valentine," said the Count, "summon up all your courage. Still the beatings of your heart. Do not let a sound escape you, and feign to be asleep. Then you will see." Valentine seized the Count's hand. "I think I hear a noise," she said. "Leave me." "Goodbye for the present," replied the Count, walking upon tiptoe towards the library door, and smiling with an expression so sad and paternal that the young girl's heart was filled with gratitude. Before closing the door, he turned around once more and said, "Not a movement, not a word. Let them think you asleep, or perhaps you may be killed before I have the power of helping you." And with this fearful injunction, the Count disappeared through the door, which noiselessly closed after him. End of Chapter 100. Chapter 101. Locusta. Valentine was alone. 2 other clocks, slower than that of Saint Philippe de Roule, struck the hour of midnight from different directions, and excepting the rumbling of a few carriages, all was silent. Then Valentine's attention was engrossed by the clock in her room, which marked the seconds. She began counting them, remarking that they were much slower than the beatings of her heart, and still she doubted. The inoffensive Valentine could not imagine that anyone should desire her death. Why should they? To what end? What had she done to excite the malice of an enemy? There was no fear of her falling asleep. One terrible idea pressed upon her mind, that someone existed in the world who had attempted to assassinate her, and who was about to endeavor to do so again. Supposing this person, wearied at the inefficacy of the poison, should, as Monte Cristo intimated, have recourse to steel. What if the Count should have no time to run to her rescue? What if her last moments were approaching, and she should never again see Morrel? When this terrible chain of ideas presented itself, Valentine was nearly persuaded to ring the bell and call for help. But through the door, she fancied she saw the luminous eye of the Count, that eye which lived in her memory, and the recollection overwhelmed her with so much shame that she asked herself whether any amount of gratitude could ever repay his adventurous and devoted friendship. 20 minutes, 20 tedious minutes passed thus, then 10 more, and at last the clock struck the half-hour. Just then, the sound of fingernails slightly grating against the door of the library informed Valentine that the Count was still watching, and recommended her to do the same. At the same time, on the opposite side, that is, towards Edward's room, Valentine fancied that she heard the creaking of the floor. She listened attentively, holding her breath till she was nearly suffocated. The lock turned, and the door slowly opened. Valentine had raised herself upon her elbow, and had scarcely time to throw herself down on the bed and shade her eyes with her arm. Then, trembling, agitated, and her heart beating with indescribable terror, she awaited the event. Someone approached the bed and drew back the curtains. Valentine summoned every effort and breathed with that regular respiration which announces tranquil sleep. "Valentine," said a low voice. The girl shuddered to the heart, but did not reply. "Valentine," repeated the same voice. Still silent. Valentine had promised not to wake. Then everything was still, excepting that Valentine heard the almost noiseless sound of some liquid being poured into the glass she had just emptied. Then she ventured to open her eyelids and glance over her extended arm. She saw a woman in a white dressing gown pouring a liquor from a phial into her glass. During this short time, Valentine must have held her breath or moved in some slight degree, for the woman, disturbed, stopped and leaned over the bed, in order the better to ascertain whether Valentine was asleep. It was Madame de Villefort. On recognizing her stepmother, Valentine could not repress a shudder, which caused a vibration in the bed. Madame de Villefort instantly stepped back close to the wall, and there, shaded by the bed curtains, she silently and attentively watched the slightest movement of Valentine. The latter recollected the terrible caution of Monte Cristo. She fancied that the hand not holding the phial clasped a long, sharp knife. Then, collecting all her remaining strength, she forced herself to close her eyes. But this simple operation upon the most delicate organs of our frame, generally so easy to accomplish, became almost impossible at this moment, so much did curiosity struggle to retain the eyelid open and learn the truth. Madame de Villefort, however, reassured by the silence, which was alone disturbed by the regular breathing of Valentine, again extended her hand, and half hidden by the curtains, succeeded in emptying the contents of the phial into the glass. Then she retired so gently that Valentine did not know she had left the room. She only witnessed the withdrawal of the arm, the fair round arm of a woman but 25 years old, and who yet spread death around her. It is impossible to describe the sensations experienced by Valentine during the minute and a half Madame de Villefort remained in the room. The grating against the library door aroused the young girl from the stupor in which she was plunged, and which almost amounted to insensibility. She raised her head with an effort. The noiseless door again turned on its hinges, and the Count of Monte Cristo reappeared. "Well," said he, "do you still doubt?" "Oh," murmured Valentine. "Have you seen?" "Alas." "Did you recognize?" Valentine groaned. "Yes," she said. "I saw, but I cannot believe." "Would you rather die, then, and cause Maximilian's death?" "Oh," repeated the girl, almost bewildered. "Can I not leave the house? Can I not escape?" "Valentine, the hand which now threatens you will pursue you everywhere. Your servants will be seduced with gold, and death will be offered to you disguised in every shape. You will find it in the water you drink from the spring, in the fruit you pluck from the tree." "But did you not say that my kind grandfather's precaution had neutralized the poison?" "Yes, but not against a strong dose. The poison will be changed and the quantity increased." He took the glass and raised it to his lips. "It is already done," he said. "Brucine is no longer employed, but a simple narcotic. I can recognize the flavor of the alcohol in which it has been dissolved. If you had taken what Madame de Villefort has poured into your glass, Valentine, you would have been doomed." "But," exclaimed Valentine, "why am I thus pursued?" "Why? Are you so kind, so good, so unsuspicious of ill that you cannot understand, Valentine?" "No, I have never injured her." "But you are rich, Valentine. You have 200,000 a year, and you prevent her son from enjoying these 200,000. "How so? The fortune is not her gift, but is inherited from my relations." "Certainly, and that is why Monsieur and Madame de Saint Méran have died. That is why Monsieur Noirtier was sentenced the day he made you his heir. That is why you, in your turn, are to die. It is because your father would inherit your property, and your brother, his only son, succeed to his." "Edward? Poor child. Are all these crimes committed on his account?" "Oh, then you at last understand." "Heaven grant that this may not be visited upon him." "Valentine, you are an angel." "But why is my grandfather allowed to live?" "It was considered that, you dead, the fortune would naturally revert to your brother, unless he were disinherited. And besides, the crime appearing useless, it would be folly to commit it." "And is it possible that this frightful combination of crimes has been invented by a woman?" "Do you recollect in the arbor of the Hotel des Postes at Perugia seeing a man in a brown cloak whom your stepmother was questioning upon Aqua Tofana? Well, ever since then, the infernal project has been ripening in her brain." "And indeed, sir," said the sweet girl, bathed in tears, "I see that I am condemned to die." "No, Valentine, for I have foreseen all their plots. No, your enemy is conquered since we know her, and you will live, Valentine. Live to be happy yourself, and to confer happiness upon a noble heart. But to ensure this, you must rely on me." "Command me, sir. What am I to do?" "You must blindly take what I give you." "Were it only for my own sake, I should prefer to die." "You must not confide in anyone, not even in your father." "My father is not engaged in this fearful plot, is he?" asked Valentine, clasping her hands. "No, and yet your father, a man accustomed to judicial accusations, ought to have known that all these deaths have not happened naturally. It is he who should have watched over you. He should have occupied my place. He should have emptied that glass. He should have risen against the assassin, specter against specter," he murmured in a low voice as he concluded his sentence. "Sir," said Valentine,
I will do all I can to live, for there are two beings who love me and will die if I die, my grandfather and Maximilian.
I will watch over them as I have over you.
Well, sir, do as you will with me.
And then she added in a low voice,
Oh, heavens, what will befall me?
Whatever may happen, Valentine, do not be alarmed. Though you suffer, though you lose sight, hearing, consciousness, fear nothing. Though you should awake and be ignorant where you are, still, do not fear. Even though you should find yourself in a sepulchral vault or coffin, reassure yourself then and say to yourself, at this moment a friend, a father, who lives for my happiness and that of Maximilian watches over me.
Alas, alas, what a fearful extremity!
Valentine, would you rather denounce your stepmother?
I would rather die 100 times. Oh, yes, die.
No, you will not die. But will you promise me, whatever happens, that you will not complain but hope?
I will think of Maximilian.
You are my own darling child, Valentine. I alone can save you, and I will. Valentine, in the extremity of her terror, joined her hands, for she felt that the moment had arrived to ask for courage. She began to pray, and while uttering little more than incoherent words, she forgot that her white shoulders had no other covering than her long hair, and that the pulsations of her heart could be seen through the lace of her nightdress. Monte Cristo gently laid his hand on the young girl's arm, drew the velvet coverlet close to her throat, and said with a paternal smile, My child, believe in my devotion to you as you believe in the goodness of Providence and the love of Maximilian. Valentine gave him a look full of gratitude and remained as docile as a child. Then he drew from his waistcoat pocket the little emerald box, raised the golden lid, and took from it a pastille about the size of a pea, which he placed in her hand. She took it and looked attentively at the Count. There was an expression on the face of her intrepid protector which commanded her veneration. She evidently interrogated him by her look. Yes, said he. Valentine carried the pastille to her mouth and swallowed it. And now, my dear child, adieu for the present. I will try and gain a little sleep, for you are saved.
Go, said Valentine. Whatever happens, I promise you not to fear.
Monte Cristo for some time kept his eyes fixed on the young girl, who gradually fell asleep, yielding to the effects of the narcotic the Count had given her. Then he took the glass, emptied 3 parts of the contents in the fireplace, that it might be supposed Valentine had taken it, and replaced it on the table. Then he disappeared, after throwing a farewell glance on Valentine, who slept with the confidence and innocence of an angel at the feet of the Lord. End of chapter 101.
And cut. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for listening to today's episode of I've Been Meaning to Read That, with me, your host, Dan. If you want to learn more about the show, you can follow us on Instagram at Meaning to Read and TikTok at I've Been Meaning. If you want to support the show to help keep it going, you can find me on Venmo at Dingus Donut, DINGUSDONUT. Supporters get a shout out on the show, and even more important, get to vote on the next book that we read. No matter what, I'll see you for our next episode. Until then, read those books you've been meaning to read, and have a lovely, lovely day.